Good morning, parish orphans and retrogrades. Happy Monday morning. Today I come to you to talk about Cardinal Sarah, who has been one of the heroes of the church over the last 7 or 8 years and will remain, of course, a holy priest. Some people online seem confused by that, but he will no longer be the prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Sacraments. It's noteworthy, before we get started, I'm going to give you 3 takeaways today about the odd case of his resignation, that he was our last conservative in the prefecture of the dicasteries and the curia. So it's a big time bummer that he's gone. And more than anything, we're going to talk about what this might mean for the Francis pontificate going forward. Dangerous times, dangerous stuff. It is an odd case. I'll explain to you why. And just after these messages, people are saying, well, don't all cardinals have to tender the resignation at the age of 75? Well, yes, but there are at least 2 prefects of the other dicasteries that are well over 75 that have tendered the resignations that were not accepted by Francis. So this means something. And it's not as simple as sometimes the fact checkers like to say. There does seem to be a strained relationship between Cardinal Sarah and Pope Francis. This is, as obvious as the strained relationship between any of the other leading conservative figures and Pope Francis. So there is a little bit more, at least, than meets the eye. We're going to work through it today on Rules for Retrogrades. Do remember to subscribe, like, click the bell so you get notified when this show comes on 3 times a week. Now we're doing predominantly live streams here on Rules for Retrogrades. And so it bears mention that the notifications are all the more important so you can catch us live. If you go to timothyjgordon.com and click enroll, 2 new classes are in open enrollment for a little bit later. Once the spring gets rolling, they'll begin in mid-April. The 2 classes that were heavily requested, one is a repeat, is church history, and the other one is Rules for Retrogrades, the book. And it's a shorter course on the book. Click enroll, you'll see those things, and you can get signed up today. Church history especially is particularly relevant to what we're going through now. The fall class filled up. This one's going to fill up quick. So go to timothyjgordon.com. Also remember, as I'm urging conservatives to get to a red state, get yourselves to a little republic, which is one of the several states of the United States of America. Use real estate for life to help you do so. That's going to do the job. It'll be people of faith that are pro-life helping you. Most of them are Catholic, not all, but most are Catholic. And it's a good cause, serving an even better cause. I'm not sure which one is better. Pro-life, anti-abortion is the cause of all causes now socially, but the long-term gain is to get all of us into 5 or 6 or 7 states together where we can begin to sever the economy, which the left already began for us, get an in-parallel economy, and work between and among people who share a res publica, the real idea of this nation. And it doesn't even have to be with all 300 plus million people. It has to be with those in whichever state we choose. So choose a good one, and the people at Real Estate for Life will help you. On to what's been called by Ed Condon the strange case of Cardinal Sarah. On Saturday morning, the Holy See announced that Pope Francis had accepted the resignation of Cardinal Robert Sarah as prefect for the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of Sacraments. The Cardinal's departure was announced by the Vatican press office without any mention of who will take his place. This is strange fact number 1. The Congregation for Divine Worship, at the beginning of the holiest season of the year, Lent, needs a leader, and we have no clue who will surrogate for Cardinal Sarah. Doubtless, it will be a Francisite, a lefty, one of the ones that joins Francis rather than opposes him, as per the discipline of the sacraments and worship, as Cardinal Sarah has certainly done. He's been rebuffed by Francis many times. I'd like to point you all to Lent of 2016. And I've talked about it a lot on this show, that which occurred between Cardinal Francis and Cardinal Sarah and Pope Francis. Cardinal Sarah instructed all the faithful of the world, if they felt so inclined, as the leader of really the disciplinary sacramental office in the Curia, he said, hey, go ahead, and everyone should try a few times this Lent celebrating the Eucharist by facing liturgical east. And the strange part, as you've heard me say many times on this show, is that Pope Francis, instead of having news hit and deafening us with his silence, Pope Francis had his people, the Vatican press office, jump on the sticks the very next morning and say, no, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do it. What Cardinal Sarah just suggested you do. That was 5 years ago, this spring, this Lent. And I've recalled it every year since then. And it was really odd. And it feels like it happened just last Lent to me, or the one before that. I actually had to read this Condon article to remember that it was that far back. This was a defining moment, not just for Cardinal Sarah, but for Pope Francis. Amid all the 50 or 60 or 70 interesting, newsworthy items that Pope Francis has made in his 8-year pontificate so far. I'm talking secular newsworthy. If you read, page B and page C. This is one of the ones that I think is the most telling. And it is most telling, obviously, for Cardinal Francis, Cardinal Sarah himself. It's an odd Freudian slip, because these two men are not confusable if we look at their policies. Not fungible cardinals in the Roman Catholic College of Cardinals. I mean, just think of what a point of contrast this informs. The idea that, really strange idea, that what Pope Francis usually does, he's weaponized ambiguity, to use a tired expression now, where he'll allow the news to hit in an indirect way or some sort of subordinated, subjunctive way, if, maybe, or this is definitely happening, but there's something muddled in the way that the news is delivered. This is the way that Pope Francis has run the pontificate. It's utterly elective. This is absolutely how he chooses to do things. It's utterly effective. You all say, oh, this is so annoying, the weaponized ambiguity. Well, we're in something of an echo chamber, because most of you listening to me right now, watching, we all tend to agree. Even the people that, disagree as to details. We agree that Pope Francis's pontificate has been harrowing, it's tiresome, it's vexing, and more than anything, it's troubling, because he uses, as Monsignor Charles Pope deigned it many years back, weaponized ambiguity to effectuate his goals. So it is extra maddening when a good cardinal makes a good proposal that's consistent with Sacrosanctum Concilium, the Vatican II document on the Mass. Says, look, let's have everyone face liturgical consecratory posture ad orientem, liturgical east. We were all cheering. Because of the time difference, I remember when he did this, it was not even a full 24 hours. It was like 12 hours. It became, daytime the next day in Italy. And I think it was Greg Burke back then, got on the sticks and said, no, don't do that. You don't have to do it. Think of the contrast. Again, I've already hit that point, but the contrast between all those, 9 or 10 Eugenio Scalfari interviews with Pope Francis, where he puts out there something that's pretty clear, but muddled enough for everyone to be really concerned, and not completely certain that Pope Francis has just denied Jesus as God while he's alive, or part of the Trinity, or that hell exists, or I'm just rattling off ones in my brain. I don't have it in my show notes. And no clarification ever comes from the Vatican. Think about February of 2016. 2016. 2 months prior to Amoris Laetitia's ignominious publication, when Pope Francis said that because of Zika virus, that artificial contraception was admissible. And then the next day, instead of coming on and dialing it down or saying, no, he didn't mean it, Greg Burke, this is the same year, 2016, that this Lenten thing happened. Might have been almost the same month. Burke came out and he said, yeah, Pope Francis meant it, and he meant condoms specifically. So it's maddening plus, let's say, for now the Pope to be using a press secretary, a press office to, in the case of 2016 Cardinal Sarah, to jump on the sticks, make a quick reactive move, a gambit, and say, no, this is what that really meant, or this is what it really should have been received as by you, our listeners worldwide, 1.4 billion Catholics worldwide. It's frustrating, but again, it's not about hypocrisy. It's about hierarchy. In this case, Pope Francis is the ultimate hierarch, the Bishop of Rome, but they are letting us know the way the left is doing at every turn, in every corner, culture, politics, church these days, that they're willing to flex their hierarchy. So you're the fool if you say, oh, don't you know that's hypocritical? It's intentionally hypocritical. They're flexing their power. That's what Pope Francis was maybe more subtly doing back in Lent of 2016, when he actually, for once, spoke to clarify the, in this case, good position of one of his subordinates in the College of Cardinals. He said, no, don't do what Sarah wants. Anyway, so that's instructive for today and for 2 days ago, Saturday, when Cardinal Sarah's resignation was accepted, because it shows that there was a lot of pressure that had built up between Pope Francis and Cardinal Sarah. And there was a lot of resistance by Cardinal Sarah, however holy a guy he is, which seems to be through the roof. Just a prayerful man. Remember, we were initially assuming he was the fifth dubia cardinal back when there was speculation that there was a fifth. He has resisted Francis's agenda. Okay, so he's the only conservative left in the prefecture of the dicasteries now, but it's not like he was the only one to reach his 75th birthday. I mean, there are others that remain in the prefecture of the dicasteries. The head of the Congregation for Clergy is Cardinal Beniamino Stella. He's almost 80. Cardinal Mark Ouellet leads the Congregation for Bishops at 76. These are at least two examples of 75-plus-year-old cardinals who are prefects in the dicasteries that remain there. So this is solely elective by Pope Francis. Don't see it as anything but, really, this is the first chance that Francis had to get rid of this pesky Cardinal Sarah from his perspective. Sarah turned 75 in June. So yeah, sure, he waited a little bit. It's not like he the very next day after Sarah's 75th birthday, he gave him the boot, but it was pretty close. It was pretty close, and it was Lent. Lent, when you need the CDW firing on all four of the cylinders the most. And maybe it's a symbolic gesture. Hey, this is 5 years, 5 Lents after you, Sarah, proposed a excellent proposal. Why aren't priests doing this at every mass, turning around, facing liturgical east? Doesn't matter whether it's the TLM or the Novus Ordo. Why is this not practiced more widely? Sacrosanctum Concilium, the Vatican II document on the liturgy, leaves it open. There's nothing that contradicts it there. And the principle of abrogation means what is not abrogated, what is not specifically struck down, obtains. There have been a few times that Cardinal Sarah has resisted Pope Francis. I want to talk about those in a second, but let's move on. It was June 2020 that Sarah turned 75. And, I read you, Cardinal Beniamino Stella and Cardinal Mark Ouellet lead as prefects other congregations within the dicasteries post 75. So this is not a rule that need be followed. This is elective on Francis's part. That's one of the takeaways. And the other one of the takeaways that I really want to underscore is he was like the only conservative left, right? Cardinal Burke was like number 4 in the church when Francis entered the throne. And within pretty much, it was between the 2014, 2015 October synods. First was the Extraordinary Family Synod, then the Ordinary Family Synod, where they set up the hijack, which came out, which was published in April 2016, Amoris Laetitia, giving communion to the divorced and civilly remarried. It was between those two October synods that Cardinal Burke nearly lost his red hat, according to some sources. Francis was furious that Burke had tried to resist the agenda at the family synods to get communion to the civilly divorced and remarried. But he did lose his high ranking. Basically, he was what used to be called the Grand Inquisitor, the high judge on the high court of the Vatican. So, and Francis has cleaned house since then. He has cleaned house. Look, the left does what it does well. It does what anyone with power should do well. It doesn't use moral means to do it, but they're aggressive. And another thing I'm sick of, just a quick aside, I am so sick of dummies saying they don't like the left-right discourse in the church. I mean, it's the dumbest thing you can say. It makes the dumbest thing you could say list, and it's toward the top of the list. The left and the right describes an ideological bandwidth that exists inside and outside of the church in a reasonably near identical way. The ideas are not, it's not like the ideological spectrum ideas, when they enter the church, it's not like light entering a prism where it's even bent much. It's just, they're the same. Leftism is leftism. Radical Marxism, which is what's taken over the world, root and branch, politics, culture, and church, is pretty much the same inside and outside of the church. Now, it must be interpreted as having disparate goals, but disparate and concomitant complementary goals. If a Marxist in the priesthood wants to do Marx's diabolical work in the church versus a community organizer who's a Marxist who wants to do cultural Marxist work versus a politician like AOC who wants to do political, legislative, diabolical Marxist work. I mean, so it insinuates different goals according with the, kind of tripartite branch, culture, church, state. But it is the same ideology of leftism. So these dummies and militant moderates, as we use the term in Rules for Retrogrades, the book, who insist that there's no left and right in the church, are just the silliest people that you hear from.
Can't you say that conservatism was just late to the party after religion, like Christianity? It's just Christianity, and then the ideas that flowed from that also became conservatism.
Yeah, Christianity, rightly construed, is what's best identified as conservatism. I strongly agree. Just the unmodified form, because that's all we're arguing for. We're arguing to conserve original Roman Catholicism, and of course, when it comes to political economy, there's more interpretation there. There are more acceptable differing points of view, but not that many. You can't be a socialist, as countless 20th century church documents have said. So I'm just sick of hearing about this, but it's a bit of a digression. Just remember Lent of 2016, number one. This is payback for that. And it's not like he had much to pay back. Pope Francis wins. The house takes. He's the king. He got his way. So I'm not sure what the payback is. I'll give you a couple more instances of maybe more realistic things that Sarah seemed to resist Francis on more effectively. But also remember that he was really the only conservative left in the prefecture of the dicasteries. That's a second important point you're not going to miss. Now, it's also important to say this. Outgoing prefects of the dicasteries do not usually have the resignations formally announced as Sarah's was, according to Ed Condon. I thought this was interesting, and I didn't realize it until he said it, and then I thought, this is true. I'd never heard of it. Instead, the replacement is usually announced by the Holy See press office, with the predecessor departing quietly and without fanfare. It is surprising that the Pope would leave the congregation charged with sacramental discipline without a leader in the Lenten run up to Holy Week. Agreed with this, and I mentioned this earlier, especially as the beer bug still raises liturgical problems, self-generating problems, and questions in many places. A few observers, and a lot of these are lefties in the church and in lefty rags, have speculated the Pope wanted Sarah's resignation to have its own moment of publicity, a kind of special mortification, humiliation for Cardinal Sarah, the good cardinal. A kind of pointed humiliation for a cardinal painted as an ultra-conservative at odds with the Pope on a range of issues. But this idea, Condon says, that the Pope wanted to personally shame Sarah in public over supposed ideological differences likely says more about those promoting it than about the real differences between Pope Francis and Cardinal Sarah. This theory is most common among, says Condon, those who have seen Sarah as a foil to Pope Francis in debates on issues like the reservation of ordination of men alone, on the nature of marriage between one man and one woman, both settled matters of Catholic doctrine. But according to Ed Condon, Cardinal Sarah was corrected 3 times by Pope Francis in ways that are worth mentioning. Now, the first one, of course, is Lent of 2016. In my mind, the biggest one. And I've talked a lot about, I've made a lot of references to this on this show in unrelated shows, because it, as I already said today, as I've said probably 100 times to you parish orphans and retrogrades before, it's the paradigm case of why you have a press office, so that a leader like Pope Francis can be appropriately reactive, and he never is appropriately reactive to stark responses to his accidentally vague words, because they're not accidentally vague, and because they were intended to be vague, and they were intended to have a ripple effect and to go unanswered. So it's a more sort of frustrating counterexample when it comes to the wider configuration of events in the Francis pontifical nightmare. All right, so the first instance besides this one is that Cardinal Sarah had waited years to implement a papal instruction to change church law to allow women to get their feet washed at the Holy Thursday services. He pushed this back. He kicked it back heroically long, as far as he could, because it's not good practice. Now, again, we're not in the realm of doctrine and dogma. Pope Francis can do this, although it's quasi-doctrinal. The discipline of the altar, the disciplines involved by men and women at church, these are quasi-doctrinal. But insofar as Pope Francis is pushing the envelope there, he technically has the right to do it. And Cardinal Sarah, the number one in the church on the discipline of disciplines and divine worship and the sacraments, he kicked that can down the road as far as he could. Let me just read you the third instance that I haven't mentioned before on this show, and then I want to go back to what happened in Lent of 2016 for a few comments. Francis also corrected Sarah in 2017 regarding the translation of the liturgy, specifically how the Catholic Church's liturgies are to be translated from the original Latin into local languages. So remember, Francis, according to the narrative, the legacy, what have you, that he's been relatively scrupulous about crafting about himself and his own pontificate, he cares about, the way that the Latin goes into the local, the localities, particularly ones like the Amazon and things like that. That one I do not recall, never saw from 2017. But let me go back and get you a few more details on the 2016 Lenten correction that Pope Francis made of Cardinal Sarah, when Cardinal Sarah urged priests worldwide to practice during Lent an Eastern, a liturgical East posture ad orientem. So it was at the Sacra Liturgia conference in London on July 5th. He urged them to start celebrating masses ad orientem, or facing away from the congregation, beginning on the first Sunday of Advent in, I guess that was February of 2016. However, Jesuit Father Federico Lombardi, Vatican spokesman, issued a statement on July 11th indicating Pope Francis had met with Cardinal Sarah on July 9th to indicate no liturgical directives will or should begin in Advent. Think of what this reflects. For Cardinal Sarah, and I've talked about it a lot, but think about this in the most stark terms. There are two kinds of announcements that one of the prefects of one of the congregations may make: a permissive one and a mandatory one. When Pope Francis is not making a challenge to the permissive status of the message given by Cardinal Sarah, hey, try liturgical East. You remember, you're allowed to do it. When Pope Francis bucked that down without saying, no, you're wrong, this is not, even though you're in charge of the CDW, you're the head guy in the world on divine worship. But he's not issuing a correction. He's not saying, no, that's wrong, they're not allowed to do that. He's just saying, I don't want you reminding priests around the world that they're allowed to face liturgical East. And he was only suggesting it for Lent anyway. You should demand, by the way, if you go to a Novus Ordo parish, you're not fortunate enough to have a TLM near you, you should demand that your priest does it every Mass, every week, every day, daily Mass. Why are you not doing this? Take Sacrosanctum Concilium, take a copy of it, the Vatican II document, and say, this leaves fully intact the idea of a liturgical East posture. It does not strike it down. I mean, that's just that. So, and I think I've characterized this as having happened in Lent of 2018 before. This is Lent of 2016. So much water is under this bridge, the Francis Bridge, now that 5 Lents ago feels like 1 or 2. Despite the frequent media characterization to the contrary, Francis has made no effort to advance a challenge to church doctrine on either of these subjects. That's the important thing on women. Now, he seems to be allowing his pawns and other chess pieces to get into place. And so I think I disagree with Condon here when he says that he's made no doctrine on either side. Well, I mean, he has made no formal new doctrine on women priests or on, liturgical language or liturgical posture. So definitely that's right. I shouldn't overspeak. I just disagree with sort of the trajectory of what Condon's saying here, but the rest of the article's quite good. On the disciplinary issue of priestly celibacy, Sarah and the Pope have been conspicuously in agreement with each other on the importance of the practice, to the frustration of many during the recent Synod on the Amazon. I'm not sure what he means here. Further, while Sarah is widely considered to be a liturgical traditionalist, there's little evidence in the last 7 years that the liturgy is a subject with much exercise, which much exercises the Pope one way or the other. Now, SSPX will tell you that Pope Francis is getting ready to remove the dispensation, which was not really a dispensation, the motu proprio by Pope Benedict XVI, allowing, though it wasn't really allowing, the Latin Mass to be said anytime, anywhere without episcopal permission, even though technically Benedict said you never really needed this. What does any of that mean? SSPX folks are convinced that this is about to be removed and that the Latin Mass will be removed, and I'm not sure how that shakes out for them. Maybe hoping for it, because then it'll drive people like me that go to diocesan or FSSP Latin masses to the SSPX. They figure, I don't know what it is, but I mean, hey, I can't say I'm certain they're wrong on this. Maybe they're right. There hasn't been much evidence there. And there hasn't been much evidence, as Condon points out, that Francis cares one way or another what happens to the liturgy. He just doesn't. Aside from a few scant pieces of evidence vis-a-vis Cardinal Sarah, like he weaponized the whole apparatus, the media apparatus, to come out in July of 2016 and say, no, don't do this. Don't do this. It's weird. It's odd. He's as clearly a man of the left as he is, which he used to deny his first 2 years of the pontificate. He's clearly a man of the left. But his darkling plan, and this is takeaway principle number 3 from today's show. What is the darkling design that he has? What's signified by this? Not just for the liturgy, but I mean, I would call all of you back to the 4-part plan that Cardinal Brandmuller, another one of the Church's heroes, one of the 2 surviving Dubia cardinals, recounted back in 2014, the second year of this pontificate. Really, was the beginning of the second year of this pontificate. He said, look, the St. Gallen Mafia wants these 4 things. First, communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. Check. Took him about 2 years after that to get. Then women, priests and or deacons. That seems to be in the works. If you followed the last 2 or 3 news items I've covered on that over the last 6 months. I think Beerbug slowed that down. Hence my debate with my bet with Eric Sammons on whether or not that would happen in 2020. I was wrong. It didn't. I point at Beerbug, but he was right. But I think it seems to be happening now. And then also priestly celibacy. Get rid of that. That's action item number 3 for the St. Gallen Mafia. Call it the Francis agenda. And then number 4, he wants complete intercommunion with the Lutherans, which that's always happening in Germany, according to many trusted sources. And what the German Bishops' Conference wants to do, allegedly, is just throw it in the world's face and make Francis like pivot or not pivot, and kind of push him on that. So the removal of Cardinal Sarah leaves this question, and he's not been replaced yet for Lent. It leaves this question: what dark plan does this signify by Francis? I don't know. I'm so sick of making predictions over the last 8 years. And I mean, as many people have pointed out, we haven't really over predicted much here. We've hit a lot of them on the head, but it gets corny and boring to try to show how smart you are with predictions. I just leave an open question, an open letter. What dark plan does this signify by Francis, if any? It seems to at least belie that he doesn't like Cardinal Sarah, and that Cardinal Sarah is no longer a thorn in his side that he will abide. But what else, if anything? I'd leave you with that. So 3 takeaways. The only conservative left in the prefecture of the dicasteries is now gone. Number 2, it's Lent 2021, 5 years after what happened in Lent 2016 with Ad Orientem and Sarah making Francis mad. So although Francis doesn't get involved in liturgy all that much, he got involved enough to undo what Sarah tried to do in Lent of 5 years ago. And number 3, what does this all mean? This action by Francis. And he hasn't replaced Sarah. Who will the replacement be? Does this point at the most ambitious goal of the St. Gallen Mafia, getting someone in the CDW office to allow intercommunion with the Lutherans? I don't know. That seems like a big step. And he hasn't been so decisive with steps 2 or 3 yet. He's still sort of playing in weaponized ambiguity with 2 and 3. He didn't do that. He was more decisive with step 1, communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. Then he slowed down, even after the Amazon Synod, on steps 2 and 3 that the St. Gallen Mafia wanted him to effectuate. Women, priest, deacons, and the eradication of priestly celibacy. So we'll see. Let's wait and see. Thank you guys for joining me here today. I will be back on Wednesday and Friday with what should be two very, very thrilling interviews. I'm just locking down the guests, but stick with me. Tune in on Wednesday and Friday. They should be quite good if I can lock down the 2 people I'm looking to lock down. God bless you guys. Say a prayer for Cardinal Sarah. He's been one of our great leaders, and he's a truly holy man. And who knows exactly what's really going on. I'll update you